Hey, I'm Sheena Shuey. I'm a registered social worker and host of the 4Q podcast. I'm passionate about normalising, not pathologising life, and that's not easy. So each episode, I have amazing guests on to share the messy, beautiful ups and downs of life in 4 key questions with tips and tricks along the way. There are moments in life where you can embrace your story and understand that it's okay not to feel okay sometimes. So let's get into it. This is the 4Q podcast. Well, hello, beautiful people. Thank you again for joining me for another episode of the 4Q podcast. We're going to be finishing up soon. Yes, this is sad, I know, but I am going on maternity leave from Savasana and Shavasana Collective very soon, and the podcast is part of that. So we're going to do one more episode to make it 52 episodes, 1 year worth of episodes, which sort of lights my heart up that it's made it this far and that you've joined me this far. And yeah, we're going to be finishing up real soon because, yes, I'm pregnant, obviously, with the second one, as many of you know. And so, we just have to wind things back a little bit. And so we definitely intend on coming back. We just don't know when, but it'll definitely be in 2022 for sure. So just a preemptive of that. But of course, you know that if you still want to connect with me, I still am taking one-on-one appointments as I am going to be working, up until, and I still have my online courses as well. So the Life Reset and the Heart and Soul Reset, which are all the therapeutic activities I'd be doing with you if we worked together, but you can do them whenever you want, wherever you want. And it's definitely the next best thing is therapy. I would never say it replaces that one-on-one because it really doesn't. It's not personalized to you, but it definitely is a really helpful thing, all based on evidence. So let's skip over that and go to 3 reasons why it would be perfectly normal for you to feel anxious. So, as many of you know, I'm a holistic social worker, but I do have a psychology background and a counselling background too. So I'm very blessed that I have sort of different disciplines informing my approach, which you won't always get with many therapists. They're usually either psychology field, social work field. So I'm very blessed to feel like I've got both. And one of the key components of our social work field compared to psychology is we look beyond the individual. So psychology really is based on individualized pathology and what's going on just for you personally, but it doesn't always take in the context or the environment of which you're in. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it doesn't do it in like treatment planning and things like that, much like social work does. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I want to start with reason number 1 why it would be perfectly normal to feel anxious in the Western world and an individualistic society like we have here in Australia, in the States, in Canada, parts of Europe. We have a very capitalist and individualized society. And when I say capitalism, sometimes people think I mean that I'm against millionaires or being successful or having nice things or something like that. And it's definitely not the case. You know, a small business in the US is $20 million. So, and I support small and medium businesses for sure. But what capitalism does is that the goal is to create capital, i.e. money or product or whatever, as opposed to a model where We have a sustainable lifestyle. So we have houses that are affordable. We have a lifestyle that's affordable. And so the focus shifts to having meaningful relationships as opposed to surviving and getting stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And in a capitalist society, we are so reliant on our jobs and on the house, and like the house that we can't afford. And, our support networks have shifted from friends and family to government and corporations. And that produces a sense of uncertainty, a sense of what's coming next. Am I going to ever feel on top of things? Am I going to ever feel done with things? As opposed to, again, if you think about how we lived, 300 years ago before the Industrial Revolution, where we shared all of the chores, all of the duties, all of the food, because realistically, our money pays for our housing, our food, and our recreational activities, right? We didn't have to pay for food or recreational activities because they were just part of life. And our housing was passed down from generation to generation, or the cost of housing was shared. So it wasn't like one family has a $600,000 loan, right? Like we do now. So in a capitalist society, there's so many ways that it creates anxiety. It creates anxiety in healthcare, in the way we're treated, the way we work together, because it's a survival of the fittest mentality. It's not community-based, it's individual-based. And so there's so many avenues I could go in explaining this, but all I want to say is in our super fast-paced, super productive, super profit, money-minded societies that we live in, particularly in Australia, we're very individualistic compared to other countries. Like we very, very, very much lack community compared to other countries. And that plays a huge part on why we're all anxious, because we're so dependent on governments and corporations as opposed to family and friends for emotional support, physical support, financial support. We're expected to work on our own, raise children on our own. And I know that you've heard me say this before, but it induces anxiety. And so it's normal to feel that. If you were working 60 hours a week and doing this and doing that, and you weren't feeling anxious, that's actually an abnormal reaction, because that means that you've become accustomed to a lifestyle that is very unnatural for human beings as animal form. We are an animal, we are a creature, and that kind of lifestyle is not natural to us. So that's reason number one why you may feel it's normal to feel anxious. Number two is around the family you were raised in and your attachment style. So let's say your family was in this capitalist, individualistic society, right? And they have to raise you, little you, from 20-something, 30-something years ago, right? 40-something years ago, 50-something years ago, whatever your age. They would have had a lot of pressure, as we do right now. And I even catch myself where my attachment with my son is great, but there are times where I'm inconsistent. So if I'm busy and I can't give him my full attention, or he's trying to have a bid for connection with me, but I'm unsupported, right? In a capitalist society where I don't have friends and family and community around me, and I'm trying to work and cook dinner and clean and do this and do that, start a business, I can't always be 100% present like my son needs. And not to say that that always leads to an anxious attachment, but the inconsistency between being present and then sometimes not having the time to give them that connection can lead to a bit of an anxious attachment. Is it, a lifelong thing? No, it doesn't have to be. But it does form a way of feeling anxious in relating to people. And so for many of us, we grew up with that inconsistency of our parents sometimes connecting with us, but then often being so busy or so tired or whatever that they couldn't connect with us, or they couldn't acknowledge our emotions, or they didn't know how to acknowledge our emotions. They just kind of go, here's some food, here's some money, here's some TV, just do whatever, you know? So when we develop what we call an anxious attachment style, that can lead to feeling anxiety, of course, because we sort of never really feel 100% secure, and we do tend to need that reassurance, like, you know, that connection. So it's like you want connection, but you kind of don't trust connection. So there's a little bit of to and fro going on. So that's the second thing. So again, we've talked about the societal level. We've now dropped down to that relationship level with parenting around. That's why it could be anxious. Now, the third reason why it could be normal for you to feel anxious is just life in general in a very fast-paced world is anxiety provoking, and we don't talk about our emotions so much. Again, that's societal as well, but things happen to us, and then we've internalized this idea either not to talk about it, not to feel it, not to process it, not to acknowledge it, to keep moving. And that really comes down to our habits and things like that, our spiritual beliefs, our values, what we're doing on a physical level. So there's individual experiences that we've had that make us anxious. And there's a very good likelihood that we've internalized not knowing how to process it, sort of feeling like we have to move past it as opposed moving through a difficult emotion, moving through a difficult situation. You know, that's not really been modeled to us. Compared to countries like in Danish culture or in Japanese culture, they accept that pain is part of life. And that paradoxically, like I spoke in the paradox of pain, makes life more enjoyable and more easy because they're not expecting it to be perfect. Whereas when we set that for ourselves and when we feel pain, we have relationship breakdowns, friendship breakdowns, you know, things like that, we really take it personally. And also our individual habits as well. You know, it is hard in our society with all of us working so much and doing so much to be on top of our physical health, be on top of our social lives and have thriving social connections and meaningful conversations, on top of being okay with our mood, being in touch with how we're feeling at any given moment, practicing mindfulness, all those things. And then on a spiritual level, knowing what our values are, what our beliefs are. Do I believe in something spiritual or religious, or do I not? That doesn't matter, but that spiritual aspect is all about your cultural beliefs, your cultural connections, your ancestry, things like that. So on an individual level, it's hard to find the balance of the biopsychosocial, spiritual, biological processes, psychological processes, social processes, and spiritual, given that we already have an anxious attachment probably, or an avoidant one, which makes us anxious anyway, or we are we are in this capitalist, fast-paced, money-driven society that just doesn't value time for yourself, time for relationships, time for deep and meaningful conversations. You know, people get often quite scared of having like a deep conversation, and I'm very blessed that my dad's from Europe and he's always been very direct, never had an issue with talking about anything difficult. And I think that's the difference between Australian, US and Canadian culture as opposed to European culture, is that they know that like you're going to have hard conversations and you're not going to connect on everything, and they're still friends. It's okay. Whereas in our culture, it's almost like you can't be direct, otherwise it's being rude somehow. But How are you supposed to connect with other people and have meaningful, deep, and authentic conversations if you can't fully express what you think and what you mean without offending someone? That's really tricky. So, so as a recap of this 3 reasons why it's actually normal to feel quite anxious in the way that we live is we live in a capitalist, fast-paced society that doesn't align with the natural rhythm of human beings' DNA, of human beings' mechanics. Secondary, being raised by parents who were in this fast-paced society, we may not have had our needs met, which as a children, which therefore can lead to avoidant or anxious attachment styles, which lead to anxiety in relationships and workplaces and things like that. And then finally, because we're so busy and we're not connected, it's very hard to keep on top of the 4 sort of key pillars of mental health or well-being, which is our psychological, social, physical, and spiritual processes. So I'd love for you to think about how can I even just start with the bottom one, healing an attachment style takes some work with a one-on-one therapist like myself, or having a secure relationship. We can heal through relationships too. And then the capitalist part, that takes a whole nother lifestyle change to learn how to exit that. So those 2, the societal and the relational level, are tricky to change. But on the individual level, something you can do today is go into our free resource library if you want, or even just write these 4 areas down and go, how do I rate myself in these 4 areas? Biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. And I've got the guide in my free resource library that just gives you prompts on what the definition of those areas is. Rate it out of 10. And then ask yourself, what is one thing I can do in each of these areas? I like to do a Sunday check-in called the Foundation Check, which is what the tool is in the free resource library on the website. We call it a foundation check because that is your foundation. Checking in with yourself once a week to go, how am I feeling in each of these areas? And what is one thing I can do in each of these areas? I will link the free resource library in the description, so that way you can just head over there and download it if you like. I'm so thankful that you took the time to be here today. Of course, if you have any questions about this episode or what I mean, or you'd like for me to describe something further, please feel free to connect with me on Instagram. Send me an email, connect on the website. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear what you got out of this episode. So take care of yourself. Have a wonderful day, week, month, whatever it may be for you. And thank you so much for supporting myself in the 4Q podcast. It really does mean a lot that you're here listening, but also the thing that makes my heart sing the most is knowing that you've invested this time in yourself and that I can help you invest this time in yourself. It just makes me so happy that hopefully you're kinder to yourself with the information I provide. Living with anxiety or stress or burnout or depression, it isn't easy. But I hope that this podcast, the purpose right from the get-go, is to normalize what you're going through, not pathologize it. And don't ever let anybody tell you that you're meant to be functioning like a normal human being in a not normal world. We're not living in normal times, nor is capitalism normal for society either. So I love you, I care about you, and I will see you next time in the 4Q podcast. Take care.